The first thing she told me was that I was holding it wrong. Not unkindly, just factually. The way someone tells you that you've been pronouncing a word incorrectly your whole life. With a slight wince that's more about the word than about you, she came around the wheel, crouched beside me, and without asking permission, put her hands over mine in the clay. "You're strangling it," she said. "Feel the difference?" She loosened my grip, reshaping my hands into something more like a suggestion than a demand. "It doesn't respond to force. It responds to pressure. There's a difference." I looked at her hands over mine, clay-covered, competent, warm, even through the cold slip of the material. She was close enough that I could see a smear of dried clay along her jaw that she didn't know was there. "Try now," she said, and stepped back before I could say anything. I tried. The clay moved differently. I didn't know if I'd done it right, but I understood, suddenly, what she meant about the difference between force and pressure. I thought about my marriage. I thought about the divorce papers sitting on my kitchen counter at home. I pressed my hands back into the clay and said nothing. My therapist's name was Dr. Okafor, and she had been suggesting I do something with my hands for 4 months. She framed it differently each time: tactile engagement, embodied practice, something unrelated to outcomes. But what she meant was, you have been in your head for 2 years, and your head is not a safe neighborhood right now, so go somewhere else for a while. I had chosen the pottery class because it met on Tuesday evenings, and Tuesday evenings had previously been date night, and I needed Tuesday evenings to become something else before they swallowed me. The studio was on the 2nd floor of a building in the Arts District, warm and slightly chaotic, smelling of earth and glaze and the particular mineral smell of water that has been near clay. There were 8 wheels arranged in 2 rows and a long work table along one wall and shelves of work, in various stages of completion, some finished and glazed, some raw, some collapsed mid-attempt and left there as evidence of the process. The instructor's name was Simone. She was not what I expected an art teacher to look like, which I recognized immediately as a failure of imagination on my part. She wore her hair up with a pencil through it. She moved through the studio like she knew exactly where everything was. She explained the basics of wheel throwing with the economy of someone who had explained it many times and still found it worth explaining. And when she demonstrated at the wheel, watching clay rise between her hands, the room went quiet in a way rooms go quiet when something true is happening. I was the only beginner in the intermediate class. This was my fault. I had registered late and misread the level. Simone noticed during the first 10 minutes and said, quietly so only I could hear, "You're in the wrong class, but stay, we'll work around it." I stayed. She came to my wheel 3 times that first session. Each time she put her hands over mine without ceremony. It was clearly how she taught, direct and physical, showing rather than describing. And each time, I learned more from the 30 seconds of her hands over mine than from all the verbal instruction in the class combined. The 3rd time, we were working on centering, getting the clay perfectly aligned on the wheel before opening it. The foundational skill without which nothing else works. I had been fighting the clay for 20 minutes. It kept drifting off center, wobbling, threatening to collapse. "Stop," she said, came around behind me. "Can I?" "Please," I said. She reached around from behind, her arms bracketing mine, her hands coming to rest over mine in the clay. Her chest was a few inches from my back, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her. "Don't push it to center," she said. Her voice was lower at this distance. "Coax it. Feel where it wants to go and redirect it." Her hands moved with mine, slow and steady, and under our combined touch, the clay began to find its center, not forced there, just guided. "There, feel that?" I felt it, the subtle shift when the clay stopped fighting and started cooperating. A vibration that moved from the clay, through my hands, through my arms, and settled somewhere in my chest. "Yes," I said. She stayed a moment longer than necessary. Then she stepped back. "Good," she said. "Now do it again without me." I tried. It wobbled. She didn't come back. I tried again. It held. By the 4th week, I was no longer the disaster of the class, and Simone had stopped coming to my wheel out of necessity and started coming, I thought, out of something else. She'd check on everyone systematically and then circle back to me, stand near my wheel and watch with her arms crossed and say things like "slow down" or "let it breathe" or "you're thinking again." I can tell. "How can you tell?" I asked one Tuesday. "Your shoulders," she said. "When you stop thinking, they drop about an inch." I consciously dropped my shoulders. She smiled, a small one, private, like it was for herself, and moved on to the next wheel. I started paying attention to her shoulders after that. They never seemed to be up. The collapse happened in week 6. I had been working on a bowl for 3 sessions, genuinely working, caring about it in a way I hadn't cared about an outcome in a while. And I was on the final shaping, drawing the walls up, and I pushed slightly too hard and slightly, the wrong place, and the whole thing folded in on itself. Just gone. A week's work in 3 seconds. I sat there with my hands in the ruins of it. The wheel slowed. The studio noise continued around me. I was aware distantly that my reaction was disproportionate. It was clay. It was a beginner bowl. It didn't matter. And also that it wasn't really about the bowl. Simone appeared beside my wheel. She looked at the collapsed clay, then at me. "Hey," she said quietly. "I'm fine," I said. Old reflex. She pulled a stool over and sat down beside me, which she didn't usually do. She picked up a small piece of the collapsed wall and turned it in her fingers. "You know what this is called?" she said. "A mistake." "A reclaim," she said. "This clay isn't ruined. You wedge it back, work the air out, and it becomes new material. Everything you put into it is still in there. It just needs to be remade into something different." I looked at the clay in her hands. "My wife left," I said. First time I'd said it to anyone outside my immediate family. 8 months ago. I spent 12 years building something and I gestured at the wheel. Simone was quiet for a moment. She didn't fill the silence with comfort or apology. "What did you build?" she asked. The question surprised me. Not "I'm sorry" or "that's terrible," but what did you build? Like the thing itself mattered. Like I mattered. "A life," I said. A good one, I thought. Turns out I was the only one who thought so. She set the piece of clay down on the wheel rim. "Were you happy?" I opened my mouth, closed it, thought about it honestly, maybe for the first time. "I was comfortable," I said slowly. I was certain. I confused those things with happy. She nodded like that meant something to her specifically. "What about you?" I said, not deflecting, genuinely asking. She looked at her hands. "I built something too," she said. "Different kind. A partnership, business and otherwise. He left the business and took most of the otherwise with him." She paused. "That was 2 years ago. I bought him out and kept the studio." "Good decision," I said. "Most days," she said, a small smile. "Some days I wedge clay at midnight and that's the whole decision." We sat beside my ruined bowl in the warm studio and I thought about reclaim, about things, that collapse not being ruined, just needing to be remade into something different. "Can I start again?" I said. "That's what the clay is for," she said. She stood up, and then, because she was Simone and direct was her only mode, she put her hand briefly on my shoulder, warm, certain. Just a moment before she moved back to the class. I wedged the clay, started over. My shoulders were down the whole time. The bowl I made in week 8 was not perfect. The walls were slightly uneven, and the rim had a wobble on one side that a more experienced potter would have corrected. Simone stood behind me when I finished and looked at it on the wheel. Both of us looking, her close enough that I could feel her presence at my back. "It's uneven," I said. "It's honest," she said. "Uneven means hands were here. Hands were paying attention." I looked at the wobble in the rim. "I want to keep it," I said. "Then it survives the kiln," she said. "Bring it back next week." I brought it back next week. She was there when I took it off the shelf. Glazed now, fired, permanent. She held it the way she held everything in the studio, with the particular respect of someone who understands what it cost. "There," she said, and handed it back to me. Her hands and my hands on the bowl at the same time. Clay that had been through fire and come out changed. "Same time Tuesday?" I said. She looked at me over the bowl. Her eyes were warm and direct, and I had spent 8 weeks learning to read. The small signals of her expression and what I read now made my heart do something it hadn't done in longer than I wanted to calculate. "Same time Tuesday," she said. She didn't let go of the bowl right away. Neither did I. Outside, the city was doing its ordinary evening things. Traffic and voices and the particular light of a sky turning toward winter. Inside, the studio was warm and smelled of earth and glaze and something new. I drove home with the bowl on the passenger seat. I put it on my kitchen table next to the divorce papers. It looked, I thought, like a beginning.